The lump under my arm was small, painless, and probably nothing, or so I told myself for weeks. It wasn't until I woke drenched in sweat for the third night in a row that I booked the appointment. Blood work, biopsy, scans. I knew the moment the doctor walked into the room without smiling that it wasn't nothing. Stage 3 lymphoma. Treatable, not curable. A dozen words that unraveled the life I'd built like thread off a spool. My name is Ethan Ward. I'm 47 years old, and until 2 months ago, I was a senior architect at a boutique firm in Portland. I designed high-end homes for people with money and opinions, worked 12-hour days, and kept a color-coded calendar that would make a project manager weep with joy. I also hadn't taken a real vacation in 6 years. There was always one more deadline. My wife Marissa was with me when I got the diagnosis. She squeezed my hand, nodded solemnly at the oncologist's plan, and asked the right questions. Back in the car, she told me we'd get through this together. "You're strong," she said, "and we've got insurance." The first week after the news, she was a force of nature. Printed appointment schedules, filled prescriptions, researched nutrition plans. She even bought me a ridiculous beanie with little lightning bolts on it. "For strength," she said, making me promise to wear it to my first chemo session. I didn't go back to work. I filed for medical leave, handed off my projects, and tried to mentally shift gears from problem-solving client needs to just trying not to throw up after treatments. The chemo hit harder than I expected. The fatigue wasn't just physical. It was soul deep, a weight that settled into my bones and stayed there. I lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks and half my hair in 3. Still, Marissa stayed on top of things, managed the meds, drove me to the infusion center, told friends and family that we were staying positive. I believed her, believed we were on the same team. Back then, I didn't question her kindness. I didn't question anything at all. It started small. Marissa forgot to refill one of my prescriptions, an anti-nausea med I depended on after chemo. She apologized, said work was crazy and she'd make it up to me. Then she missed a treatment session entirely, texting at the last minute that a client meeting had run late. I didn't get angry. People make mistakes. And truthfully, I wasn't in any shape to argue. I told myself it was stress, that watching your husband fight cancer takes its toll. But stress doesn't explain how she started spending whole evenings out, claiming dinner with coworkers, always turning off her phone during these outings. It doesn't explain why our joint calendar suddenly became her personal schedule, filled with vague appointments and gym classes she never used to care about. She began managing our finances exclusively, insisting she was just making things easier while I recovered. Passwords were changed. Statements were paperless now, she said, easier to manage digitally. I let her, trusted her. I didn't think much of it when she started locking her phone. Everyone locks their phone. But the tension in her shoulders when I glanced at her screen mid-text was new. So was the way she smiled less at home but laughed too loudly on the phone in the hallway. One night after a treatment, I woke up around 2 a.m. and found her in the kitchen whispering into her phone. When I asked who it was, she flinched, then said it was her sister. I nodded and went back to bed. I didn't believe her. She still went through the motions, made smoothies, booked appointments, kissed my forehead, but something in her had shifted. I could feel it in the air between us, in the way her hand no longer lingered when she touched mine. She looked at me like I was a spreadsheet she couldn't balance. I convinced myself this was temporary. That illness was driving a wedge, not malice. That I was imagining things. But deep down, I'd started keeping track. Not of what she did, but what she didn't. And it was beginning to add up. The waiting room was half empty and smelled like antiseptic and vending machine coffee. I sat in my usual chair by the window, a paperback in one hand, the other gripping the armrest just tight enough to hurt. Chemo days were routine now. Painful, yes, but familiar. Like visiting a dentist you didn't like but saw every week anyway. I'd checked in, nodded at the receptionist, even joked with the security guard who always complimented my beanie. But after 15 minutes, the nurse came out. Andrea, the one with the streak of purple in her hair and the soft voice. "Mr. Ward?" she asked, looking puzzled. "That's me," I said, standing slowly. She hesitated. "I'm confused. Your appointment was canceled." I blinked. "What?" She glanced down at the clipboard. "We got a call 2 days ago. Said you were postponing treatment indefinitely. From your emergency contact." "That's my wife." Andrea nodded. "Right. Marissa Ward. She said you needed time to explore alternative options." My mouth went dry. I hadn't canceled anything. Hadn't discussed alternative options. Hadn't even missed a dose. "Did she give a reason?" "Not really," she said. "Just that you wouldn't be continuing treatment for now and that she'd call to reschedule if anything changed." I sat back down, slower this time. My hands shook. "Can you reinstate the appointment?" She hesitated again. "We'll try to work you back into the rotation, but the meds are dosed in advance. We can't start today." Of course not. This wasn't like rescheduling a haircut. I nodded, thanked her, and walked out without another word. In the car, I sat motionless for 10 minutes, checked my phone 3 times. No messages from Marissa. She'd called, used my name, canceled my treatment. I didn't want to believe it. Not yet. Not without hearing her voice say it. There had to be a mistake. A miscommunication. Something. But as I stared through the windshield at the gray sky and the empty parking lot, something settled into my chest. A weight I hadn't felt since the diagnosis. Not fear, not sadness. Doubt. Marissa was at the kitchen island when I walked in, sipping tea like she hadn't just put a loaded gun to my treatment plan. She looked up and smiled faintly. "Hey, you're back early." "Yeah," I said, hanging up my coat. "Because the appointment was canceled." She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "Really? That's weird. They didn't say why?" I stepped closer. "They said you canceled it." Her eyes widened just a little too much. "What? That's insane. Why would I do that?" "That's what I'd like to know." She set her cup down carefully, a bit too slowly. "There must have been some kind of mix-up. Maybe they meant another patient? They said you gave my name, my birth date, that you were my emergency contact, and that I was postponing indefinitely." I watched her closely. Marissa crossed her arms. "Well, I didn't. Obviously. That sounds like a clerical error. Hospitals mess things up all the time." I pulled out my phone. "You mind showing me your call log from 2 days ago?" That's when she got defensive. "Seriously, Ethan? You think I'd go behind your back and cancel your chemo? What kind of person do you think I am?" I didn't answer, just waited. She sighed and turned the screen toward me. Her recent calls list conveniently cleared. "New phone update," she said, eyes narrowing. "Must have wiped my history." "Right." I nodded slowly. "Okay." I didn't push, didn't raise my voice. I just let the silence stretch. She busied herself with the dishwasher, clanking plates louder than necessary. I watched her shoulders tense, the small twitch in her jaw. That night, I pretended everything was fine. Ate the dinner she reheated from a container. Smiled at the right moments. But I made a backup of my medical records. Changed my account passwords. Moved some savings into a separate account. Because I wasn't sure what she'd done. But for the first time, I was sure she could. By the next morning, the doubt had evolved into a quiet certainty. It wasn't proof, not yet, but something had shifted. A sliver of ice in the bloodstream, cold and purposeful. I knew that feeling from the early days of architecture school, when something didn't line up, and you had to strip everything back to find the flaw. This time, the blueprint was my life. While Marissa was at work, I went to the hardware store and bought 2 discrete security cameras, small enough to blend into the house, smart enough to upload to cloud storage. One in the kitchen, the other in the hallway outside our bedroom. I didn't need footage of everything. I needed context. Voices, timing, reactions. Then I dug out the old phone I used when traveling overseas, rigged it with a call recording app, and synced it to our shared home line using a VoIP connection. Nothing illegal, just precautionary. She'd already taken liberties with my medical decisions. I was evening the playing field. That afternoon, I returned to the hospital under the pretense of clarifying my next treatment cycle. I asked for a copy of my entire file. Notes, appointment logs, communication records, authorization forms. I smiled as I asked, told them I was updating a personal health binder. Andrea handed me a printed stack with a friendly smile, unaware I was carrying home the autopsy report of my marriage. At home, I scanned through the records at my desk while Marissa showered. There it was. Multiple entries, each listing a phone call from E. Ward, canceling or deferring treatment. The timestamps matched windows when Marissa had been home alone. The notes were detailed, each call claiming treatment fatigue or interest in holistic alternatives. My name, my file, her words. I saved everything to an encrypted folder, printed backup copies, and hid them in the back of a file cabinet under old tax returns. I didn't know yet what she wanted, if it was money, freedom, or just control. But she'd crossed a line, quietly, neatly, like a scalpel under skin. So I'd be quiet too. I listened to the first voicemail 5 times. "Hi, this is Ethan Ward. I need to cancel my upcoming chemotherapy session. I've decided to pause treatment for now. Yeah, I'm just exploring other options. Thank you." It was almost perfect. Calm, controlled. But it wasn't me. The voice was just slightly off, too soft, too unsure. Marissa had always been good at mimicry. I remembered how she'd joke around with friends, doing impressions after a couple glasses of wine. But this wasn't a joke. This was someone impersonating me to manipulate my medical care. I kept listening, ears tuned to every breath and inflection. The end of the call, there it was. A small exhale before she hung up. The exact way she sighed when finishing a work call. Confident. Final. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding but face expressionless. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was evidence. Cross-referencing the logs with our home phone records revealed a pattern. Calls placed to the oncology department from our landline every few weeks. Always during windows where Marissa claimed she was running errands. Each followed by a sudden shift in my treatment schedule. The file included notations from different nurses. Patient seems hesitant about chemo. Considering holistic options, wife expressed concern about side effects. Possible anxiety, follow-up recommended. Except I'd never said those things. Not once. I compiled the calls into a folder, time-stamped and labeled. Then I synced the audio files to my cloud backup and sent a copy to a secure drive Riley had set up. It wasn't enough to know the truth. I had to protect it. That night, Marissa cooked pasta and poured wine like we were in some normal phase of marriage. She asked how I was feeling and offered to rub my shoulders. I smiled, said I appreciated her support. And when she went to bed early, claiming exhaustion, I stayed up in my office, staring at the grainy security feed of the hallway. She walked by once, paused, and looked directly into the lens without realizing what it was. I whispered to myself, "Got you." It started with a drawer that stuck. I was looking for an old blueprint template in my office when the bottom drawer jammed halfway open. A slip of paper had wedged itself into the track, half pulled, half crumpled. When I freed it, I saw the header. Last Will and Testament of Ethan Ward. I hadn't updated my will since 2017. This version was dated 6 weeks ago. It listed Marissa as the sole beneficiary. House, savings, insurance, everything. Not unusual on its own. She'd been my next of kin for years. But what stopped me cold was the signature. It looked like mine at a glance, but not under scrutiny. The loop on the E was too tight. The tail of the D curled backward, something I hadn't done since college. She'd forged it. Badly. I flipped through our shared filing cabinet, heart pounding harder with each page. Insurance documents, beneficiary forms, loan paperwork. All of it looked freshly printed, updated with her information, not mine. Then I found the kicker. A life insurance policy from Phoenix Financial, newly expanded. Coverage doubled. Effective date? 1 week after my diagnosis. There was a consent form attached. Ethan Ward, again. Same off-kilter signature. I checked my email. No confirmation, no policy alert. She'd gone through a broker, someone I'd never spoken to. It was a clean job if you didn't know what to look for. But I did now. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. It all fit. The canceled chemo. The financial control. The way she'd started pulling away, then leaned back in just enough to look supportive. She didn't want a divorce. She didn't want a separation. She wanted a payout. I scanned everything, backed it up, sent copies to Riley. Then I poured myself a drink I wasn't supposed to have and stood in the living room staring at the woman who might have been planning my death with the same calm she used to arrange dinner parties. And I made a decision. No more watching from the sidelines. Marissa. She looked up, one of my t-shirts in her hands. Yeah? Why did you forge my signature on a will? Her hands froze mid-fold. What are you talking about? In the office drawer, the new version you didn't tell me about, the one with the fake signature. She laughed too quickly. What? No, that's ridiculous. That was just a draft. Something I was working on with Riley before you got sick. Riley doesn't draft wills, I said flatly. She's a paralegal, not your lawyer. Try again. Her smile faltered. Okay, fine. I was just being prepared. You've been going through so much. I didn't want to burden you with paperwork. I held her gaze. And the life insurance? The policy increase? Also part of your preparedness? Marissa's eyes narrowed. You're not thinking straight. The chemo's messing with your memory. You told me to take care of those things, remember? No, I said. I didn't. and you know I didn't." She dropped the shirt on the table. "Ethan, listen to yourself. You're paranoid. You've been out of it for weeks. You forget conversations. You're exhausted. I'm doing everything I can to support you, and this is the thanks I get?" "You canceled my treatments," I said. She went pale. "What?" "I have the call logs, the voicemails, the one where you pretended to be me." She shook her head, stepping back. "This is insane. You need help. Real help." "I do," I said quietly. "But not the kind you think." She stared at me like I was a stranger, like I was the one who'd changed. "You're making this up," she said. "None of this is real." "It's real," I replied, "and I have the proof." She stood there for a long time, saying nothing. And in that silence, something broke between us. Something that had already been cracking for months. I didn't yell. I didn't demand. I just walked past her, up the stairs, and locked the office door behind me. Because now I wasn't just suspicious. I was sure. Riley answered on the second ring. "Ethan?" "It's been a while." "Yeah," I said. "Too long? You still do freelance work?" "I do," she replied. "What's going on?" "I think my wife forged my signature on a will and bumped up my life insurance behind my back." Silence. "I'll clear my afternoon," she said. We met at a cafe near her office. Riley was sharp as ever. Gray cardigan, legal pad already out before I even sat down. We hadn't talked much since she left the firm a couple years ago, but she'd always been one of the few people I trusted, without needing to explain why. I slid the folder across the table. Printed documents, scanned copies, my notes in the margins. She scanned through quickly, her expression shifting from curiosity to quiet concern. "This is sloppy," she murmured, tapping the will. "The signature's wrong, ink's different. Witnesses are the same handwriting. It's not even legally airtight, but it's enough to cause damage. And the insurance forms? Worse. Those don't even require a notary, just a name and a forged scrawl." We moved to a booth in the back. Riley opened her laptop and began compiling everything into organized folders. One for financial records, one for medical interference, one for potential forgery and fraud. "You need to lock down your assets," she said. "Transfer anything with both your names into a trust in just yours. Strip out joint permissions. Freeze shared accounts." "She'll notice." "She already made her move," Riley said. "You're just responding." By the time I left the cafe, we had a plan in place. Riley would keep compiling, I'd keep recording. I reset all my passwords, rerouted bills to a P.O. box, and opened a new account at a different bank. Quietly. Thoroughly. I didn't tell Marissa I'd seen Riley. I didn't tell her I was putting safeguards in place. At dinner, she mentioned planning a weekend away to clear our heads. I told her that sounded great. Because the next phase wasn't about confronting her anymore. It was about containment. 2 days later, Riley called. "I found him." "Found who?" "Derek Carson, 29, personal trainer, Instagram life coach. Also, your wife's boyfriend?" I said nothing. "She's been transferring money to his account. I tracked 3 large withdrawals from your shared checking, $2,000 here, 5 there, marked as consulting fees. But Derek doesn't have an LLC, no business license. Just an ABS and motivation quotes kind of guy." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "How far back does it go?" 3 months, just after your diagnosis. Transfers start small, then ramp up fast. I pulled his public information. He's got a studio downtown, rents a loft in the Pearl, paid up front, guess with whose money? It hit harder than I expected. Not because she cheated. That part had been a dull throb for weeks. It was the timing. The way she waited until I was too weak to notice, too tired to question. She's using our money to fund her next chapter, I said quietly. She's erasing you while you're still breathing, Riley added. I asked her to dig deeper, if there were more accounts, more transactions. She agreed and said she'd start setting up a financial affidavit, just in case things escalated. That night, I watched Marissa brush her teeth in the mirror. She hummed to herself, same as always, like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't trading my life in like an old lease for something newer, more toned, and conveniently unburdened. I smiled, said goodnight, turned out the lights, and lay awake in the dark, waiting for morning. Because now it wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about holding her accountable for every dollar, every lie, every carefully planned betrayal. And I wasn't alone anymore. It took a week to unwind a marriage on paper, less time than I expected, considering it had taken 13 years to build. Riley connected me with a discreet estate lawyer, someone who didn't flinch at my request for urgency and privacy. By Thursday, my new will was signed and witnessed. Everything went to my sister, Karen, and my godson, Miles. Marissa's name didn't appear once, not even as backup. Next came the house. Legally, the mortgage was mine, purchased through my VA benefits. She was listed only as an occupant, something she'd forgotten when she forged that refinance application last year, and I quietly stopped it from going through. We transferred the deed into an irrevocable trust, naming Karen as successor trustee. If anything happened to me, Marissa couldn't touch it. Not without a court battle she wouldn't see coming. The insurance came last. I revoked her beneficiary status across every policy. Life, health, short-term disability, each one updated, notarized, and backed up in triplicate. Riley filed everything with timestamps and backup logs. She was relentless, professional, and exactly the friend I needed. I also scheduled a new round of chemotherapy at a private clinic in Lake Oswego. Smaller, quieter, out of Marissa's reach. I didn't tell her. Just arranged my appointments around her workouts and wellness retreats, the ones she never seemed to sweat at. The clinic ran full diagnostics, confirmed progression, and started me back on treatment immediately. I brought a new bag with me, packed my meds myself. The nurse called me by name and checked ID at every step. It was the first time I'd felt safe in months. When I got home that night, Marissa was on the couch, legs curled under her, glass of wine in hand. She asked how I was feeling. I said I was tired, that things were getting worse, that I might not have long. She put a hand on mine, eyes wet with sympathy that didn't quite reach her voice. And that's when I knew. She wasn't planning to leave me. She was waiting for the finish line. The next morning, I left the bait. A fake document, sloppy enough to raise curiosity, official-looking enough to feel real. It was labeled Prognosis Review Final Stage Consideration. I placed it slightly crooked on the desk, half covered by a notebook, like I'd meant to hide it, but forgot. Next to it, I left an opened bottle of pain meds with a few pills missing, and a note with made-up side effects that hinted at cognitive fog and emotional instability. Then I went for a walk. When I came back an hour later, the paper had moved. Slightly. The notebook was nudged. The pills were rearranged. I checked the hallway cam footage from my phone. Marissa had entered the office 10 minutes after I left, picked up the document, read it, snapped a photo, then went back to the living room like nothing happened. That evening, I told her casually that my doctor wanted to try one last protocol. Experimental, high risk. Could go either way, I said, watching her face. She blinked once. You sure that's what you want? It's all I've got left. She was quiet the rest of the night. No tears, no hugs, just occasional glances when she thought I wasn't looking. At 11:47 p.m., while she thought I was asleep, she stepped into the hallway, phone in hand. The security mic picked it up clearly. Hey, she whispered. He's doing worse. No, I saw the paperwork. Final stage or close to it. I'll check for the insurance updates tomorrow. If he really did increase the payout, we're golden. Just a few more weeks. She laughed then. Soft, breathy, the kind people mistake for affection when they don't know what betrayal sounds like. Yeah, she said. I'll call you back from the car. I saved the footage to the cloud, then copied it to 3 drives. One went into the fireproof lockbox, because I didn't need her to confess. She already had. Riley called just after sunrise. I've got someone, she said. Private investigator, licensed to handle legal prep, discreet, ex-cop. By noon, we were in a quiet corner booth at a diner off I-84. The investigator's name was Dan McCready, mid-50s, clipped voice, wore a suit like it still belonged to a badge. I slid the flash drive across the table. What am I looking at? He asked. Forged medical and insurance documents, recordings of my wife impersonating me, footage of her coordinating with a man named Derek Carson to profit off my death. McCready plugged the drive into his tablet and scrolled in silence. His eyes narrowed at the voicemail from the oncology center, froze completely at the hallway recording. She say if he really did increase the payout? He asked. She did. McCready leaned back. All right. This isn't just domestic betrayal. This is organized insurance fraud, attempted medical interference, and possibly conspiracy to commit murder. If you want to press charges, we've got enough to start. Start everything, I said. Within 48 hours, the ball was rolling. Riley handled the affidavits. McCready delivered the files to the DA's office. We met with a representative from my insurance provider and the hospital's legal counsel. I showed them the forged forms, the fake cancellations, the voicemail impersonations. No one asked if I was sure anymore. They all just nodded grimly and took notes. The arrests came on a Tuesday morning. I didn't watch it happen, but I got the call from McCready. They got her leaving a yoga class. Derek was picked up at his studio. Your house is clean, search warrant executed. All the documentation matched. What are the charges? Fraud, conspiracy, forgery, attempted insurance theft, and attempted murder based on medical interference. She's looking at real time, Ethan. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the photos on the wall. Design sketches, my diploma, a vacation picture of us smiling in Monterey. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel much at all. But I did feel safe. For the first time in months, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. Because the truth had come out. And the people who tried to profit from my death were finally facing the consequences. The chemo continued. Harder now, but no longer shadowed by doubt. My new medical team treated me like I mattered, like I was part of the plan. No more cancellations, no more missed doses, no more whispered phone calls behind closed doors. Riley sat with me during the longest sessions. Karen flew in from Chicago for a week, took over the kitchen, and we fought like kids again over how much salt belongs in pasta water. I told her everything. She cried harder than I expected. "I never liked her," she said, "but I didn't think she'd try to kill you." "Neither did I said, "until she did." The house was officially placed under trust protection. Marissa's name was scrubbed from every document she'd ever touched. The court revoked her claims to the estate, citing fraud and malicious intent. Derek took a plea deal. Marissa didn't. She's still fighting it, but her bond was denied. The footage spoke louder than her denial ever could. The insurance company restored my previous policy and added fraud protection to my file. Their rep called me personally to apologize. "We've seen a lot, Mr. Ward," she said, "but not like this." "I know," I replied. "Me neither." I spent a few weeks going through what was left, replacing passwords, updating accounts, cleaning out drawers that still smelled faintly of her perfume. I boxed up her things and left them on the porch. Her lawyer picked them up. I never saw her again. One evening, Riley suggested I make a formal statement for the legal support group she volunteered with, something that could help others going through medical abuse or estate manipulation. "I don't want to be a sob story," I said. "You won't be," she said. "You'll be a warning." So I did. Sat in front of her phone camera and told the truth, start to finish, about the marriage, the illness, the lie that grew in the quiet, the paperwork, the camera, the voicemail. I told them what I'd learned, that silence doesn't protect you, that trust should never come at the cost of your life, that survival, in every sense of the word, starts the moment you stop being polite and start paying attention. Then I thanked them for listening, and I walked off camera. Not broken, just rebuilding. The first time I heard the word remission, I didn't react. I just nodded, thanked the doctor, and walked out into the parking lot like it was any other Tuesday. It wasn't. That was 11 months after Marissa's arrest, 10 months after the last round of chemo, 9 after I sold the house that nearly became my coffin. I used the proceeds and a design I'd sketched between treatments to build something better. A cabin outside Bend, nestled in pine and quiet, where cell service is a rumor and the air smells like cedar and rain. I built it with my own hands. Framing, insulation, finish work, every beam aligned, every joint square. There's something satisfying about starting from bare ground and watching something rise where nothing used to be. You control what stays, what doesn't, what belongs. The cabin has 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for guests I don't get often, but always have room for. Riley came for a weekend last fall, brought a bottle of wine and the thickest book I've ever seen. Karen and Miles visit once a season, bringing noise and warmth and reminders of life outside my head. I sleep better here, eat better, breathe without wondering what's being hidden behind kitchen drawers or locked phone screens. I also speak, not just with friends, but at hospitals, advocacy panels, even a few law enforcement briefings. Riley and I built a presentation on coercive medical interference, what it looks like, how to spot it, what to do when the person sabotaging your health is the one tucking you in at night. It started small. Now I get letters, emails, sometimes from people halfway across the country. Stories like mine, some worse. I write back when I can. I tell them they're not crazy, they're not alone, and if they're still alive, they're already winning. This morning, I stood on the porch of the cabin and watched the sunrise claw its way over the ridge, coffee in hand, wind in the trees, the kind of silence that doesn't feel dangerous anymore. And I thought, some people try to profit from your death. The trick is living well enough to deny them the payday. I took another sip, then I got back to work. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.